my parents canceled my birthday to prioritize my sister's event. They didn't expect me to cancel something far bigger, their mortgage payment. I canceled it all. Imagine pouring your heart, soul, and every single dollar into supporting your family, only for them to cancel your 25th birthday party because your sister had a date with the mayor's son. Can you believe it? That's exactly what happened to me, and it was the moment I realized some decisions have consequences my family never saw coming. I can still hear the words like a punch to the gut. We're canceling your birthday party, Samantha. Madison has a date with the mayor's son tonight, and we need to focus on that instead. My mother stood there in our kitchen, completely stone-faced, talking about my 25th birthday like it was just changing dinner plans. And behind her, my younger sister Madison, already smug, smirked, adjusting her designer dress, a dress I had unknowingly helped pay for. What none of them knew was that I'd been secretly covering their mortgage for the past year and a half. And what they were about to discover was that I was finally done. The morning of September 15th, my 25th birthday, started out like any other Saturday in the Henderson house. I woke up early, still in my childhood bedroom, the same room I'd been stuck in for 2 years since moving back home. Why? To help my family through their temporary financial difficulties, of course. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was 25, living at home, and simultaneously the primary breadwinner for a family who, most days, completely forgot I even existed. I headed downstairs in our big colonial house in Westfield, Connecticut, expecting, well, my birthday morning chaos. You know, growing up, my parents always made birthdays a huge deal. Streamers, my favorite chocolate chip pancakes, that buzz in the air when people are celebrating someone they actually love. Instead, I walked into a scene straight out of a bizarre wedding. My mom, Linda, was frantically arranging white roses in crystal vases. My dad, Robert, was polishing silver that hadn't seen the light of day in years. What was going on? "Morning, Mom," I said, trying to sound cheerful, pouring myself coffee from the fancy machine I'd bought them last Christmas. "The flowers are beautiful. Are those for tonight?" She barely even looked up. "Oh, Samantha. Yes, these are for Madison's dinner. We want everything to be perfect when Marcus arrives." Marcus Wellington III. The mayor's 28-year-old son. He'd recently taken an interest in Madison, my 23-year-old sister. Madison had been floating on cloud nine all week since he'd asked her to dinner at the country club. And my parents? They were beyond thrilled, practically salivating at the social climbing opportunities they'd been dreaming about for years. "That's nice," I managed, my voice a little tight, still waiting for someone to acknowledge it was my birthday. "So, what time should I expect everyone for my party tonight?" The question just hung there, thick in the air. My mom's hands froze on a rose stem. My dad looked up from the silver serving tray he'd been buffing like his life depended on it. And then, there she was. Madison, appearing in the doorway, already dressed in a cream-colored Chanel dress. A dress that, I knew, cost more than most people's monthly rent. "About that, sweetheart," my mother began, her voice taking on that sickly sweet tone she always used when she was about to utterly disappoint me, but still wanted to pretend she cared. "We've been thinking, and we believe it would be best to postpone your celebration." I put my coffee mug down carefully, the ceramic making a soft click against the cold granite. "Postpone it? Just until next weekend," my father quickly jumped in, as if a week's delay would somehow make this whole thing reasonable. "You understand, don't you? Madison's dinner with Marcus is incredibly important. The Wellingtons are pillars of this community, and if this relationship develops..." He didn't even need to finish the sentence. I'd heard variations of this speech my entire life. Madison was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who would marry well and elevate our family's social status. I was the practical one, the reliable one, the one who worked 60-hour weeks in corporate finance and handed over most of my paycheck just to keep our family afloat. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," my mother declared, practically attacking her flower arrangement with renewed vigor. "The Wellingtons have invited Madison to join them for dinner at the country club, and Marcus wants to bring her back here for dessert. We need the house to be absolutely perfect. Then Madison piped up, her voice carrying that sweet, innocent tone that had gotten her out of trouble since kindergarten. I'm sure you understand, Sam. You've always been so mature about these things. Besides, she shrugged, 25 isn't really a milestone birthday, is it? It's not like you're turning 30 or getting married or anything important like that. The casual cruelty of her words took my breath away. It wasn't even malicious, not really. Madison genuinely didn't see anything wrong with it. In her world, her needs had always taken precedence. Everyone else's wants and feelings? Secondary. At best. I've already called the caterer, my mother added, sealing my fate. They're bringing everything here instead of to the rental hall. The menu will be more sophisticated for Marcus anyway. I just stood there, my mind reeling. The caterer I had paid for. The rental hall I had put a deposit on. The birthday celebration I had been looking forward to for weeks. It wasn't about the party itself, not really. It was about one day. One day where, for once, I might actually be the center of attention in a family that had overlooked me for most of my life. And now that was gone. What about our guests? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Aunt Carol is driving up from Philadelphia. My college friends took time off work. Jenny even flew in from Chicago. We'll call everyone, my father assured me, waving his hand dismissively. They'll understand. Family comes first, and Madison's future is at stake here. Madison's future. Always Madison's future. Never mind the fact that I was the one ensuring we had a roof over our heads and food on the table. For 2 years, I'd watched my parents fawn over my sister while treating me like their live-in ATM. Madison's credit card bills. Madison's car payments. Madison's designer wardrobe. All subsidized by my salary while she worked a part-time boutique job that was clearly more hobby than career. The house needs to be perfect, my mother stressed again. Absolutely perfect. The Wellingtons have such high standards, and first impressions matter so much. Madison, darling, you should go get your hair done. I made you an appointment at that salon downtown. The same salon that charged $300 for a cut and style. The same salon that would be paid for with money I transferred to their account every single month. I just stood there, watching them. Watching my family orchestrate the complete destruction of my birthday with the same enthusiasm they had once put into planning it. The efficiency was actually remarkable. In 10 minutes flat, they'd dismantled weeks of preparation and completely rearranged their priorities, without a single thought about how it might affect me. I need to make some calls, I said, finally breaking the silence. Oh, good, my mother chirped, relief flooding her voice. I knew you'd be understanding about this. You always are. Can you handle calling the guests? I need to focus on getting everything ready here. I just nodded. Walked back upstairs to my room. Closed the door behind me. But I wasn't planning to call my guests to cancel anything. Instead, I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the online banking system I used to manage, well, not just my finances, but my family's too. For the past 18 months, I had been making their mortgage payments. $3,000. Every single month. Transferred from my account to theirs, because my father's small accounting practice wasn't pulling in enough, and my mother's part-time library job barely covered groceries. They'd come to me, crying, telling me they might lose the house that had been in our family for 15 years. And I, being me, had stepped in without a second thought. Rearranged my entire life, moved back home to save on rent, and quietly became the financial backbone of a family that, apparently, only remembered I existed when they needed money, or when something more interesting wasn't happening. But as I stared at that upcoming automatic transfer, scheduled for tomorrow, September 16th, a chilling kind of clarity settled over me. They wanted to cancel my birthday from Madison's date. They thought my feelings were less important than impressing some rich boy. Slowly, deliberately, I clicked into the transfer settings. And I paused that automatic payment. Then, I opened a new browser window. My search? Apartments in downtown Hartford. It was time for some real changes in the Henderson household. Changes that would help my family understand the true value of priorities. Hard lessons were coming. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Jenny. Can't wait for tonight. Just landed at Bradley. Should I head straight to your house? I smiled, a dark, determined smile, as I typed back, change of plans. I'll pick you up in an hour. We're going to have a very different kind of celebration. Downstairs, I could hear my mother. Her voice, sharp and demanding, directing my father on where to place furniture for maximum impact when Marcus arrived. They were staging our home like a theater set, you know? Creating this illusion of effortless elegance that was only possible because of the money I contributed every single month. But tonight, they would get exactly what they planned for. A perfect evening, focused entirely on Madison. And tomorrow, they would begin to understand what happens when you take the person who holds your entire world together for granted. I closed my laptop. And then, I started packing a bag. After all, I had some apartment viewings to schedule. I picked Jenny up from Bradley International Airport in my trusty Honda Civic, the same car I'd been driving for 6 years. Meanwhile, Madison was probably cruising around in the BMW convertible my parents had somehow leased for her 21st birthday. Jenny threw her arms around me the second she saw me, her vibrant red hair practically glowing in the afternoon sunlight. "Happy birthday, financial wizard!" she exclaimed, using the nickname she'd given me back in college when I helped half our dorm avoid credit card debt. "I brought you something amazing from Chicago, this boutique chocolatier that just opened." As we drove toward Hartford, I found myself pouring out the whole story to Jenny. Not just about the birthday cancellation that morning, but everything that had led up to it. She listened with that incredible, focused attention that always reminded me why we stayed best friends, even living in different cities. "Wait," she interrupted, as we merged onto I-91. "You've been paying their mortgage for how long?" 18 months, I confirmed, skillfully navigating around a slow-moving truck. "Ever since Dad's business started struggling, and Mom cut her hours at the library to help Madison with her modeling career." Jenny snorted. "Modeling career? The girl who did one local department store catalog?" The absurdity of it hit me again. Madison had done exactly one professional photo shoot for some regional clothing chain, earning maybe $800 total. But somehow, that was enough for my parents to justify her cutting her work hours at the boutique to pursue opportunities in the industry. Meanwhile, I was pulling 60-hour weeks at Hartwell and Associates, one of Connecticut's premier financial consulting firms, building a reputation as the go-to analyst for complex corporate restructuring. "Tell me about this job of yours," Jenny said as we exited toward downtown Hartford. "Last I heard, you were just an associate." I felt a small, quiet surge of pride. "I became a senior analyst last year. I'm the youngest person at the firm to handle major client portfolios independently. My specialty? Saving companies from bankruptcy, restructuring debt, renegotiating terms, finding hidden assets." I sighed, a bitter laugh escaping me. Ironically, I'm apparently better at saving other people's financial lives than I am at protecting my own. What I didn't tell Jenny, what I hadn't told anyone, was that I'd been quietly building my own consulting practice on the side. 3 evenings a week, and most weekends, I worked with smaller businesses and individuals who couldn't afford Hartwell's premium rates. Word of mouth had been spreading steadily. I developed a reputation for untangling the most complicated financial messes with creativity and discretion. This side practice? It was born purely out of frustration with my family's situation. Watching my parents make increasingly poor financial decisions while relying on my income had taught me so much about how many people struggle with money management. It's usually emotional decision-making, you know? Not mathematical ignorance. I actually found genuine satisfaction in helping people understand their options and regain control of their financial lives. "So, you're basically a financial superhero," Jenny observed, as we pulled into the parking garage of the downtown Marriott, where I'd made a reservation. "And your family has no idea." That was the crux of it, wasn't it? My parents saw me as their reliable, steady daughter, always there to clean up their messes. They had no concept of my professional reputation, my growing network of contacts, or the fact that I'd been carefully building a safety net for myself while supporting them. And they certainly had no idea that I'd been documenting every single financial transaction for the past 2 years, every mortgage payment, every credit card bill I'd covered, every emergency expense that had somehow fallen to me. As a financial professional, I understood the importance of detailed records. As their daughter, I'd always hoped that documentation would never actually be necessary. We checked into the hotel and settled into the elegant lobby bar. Jenny, of course, insisted on ordering champagne, despite my protests. "You're going to tell me the whole story," she declared, raising her glass. "Start from the beginning. When did you become the family ATM?" The story went back further than the mortgage payments. It started in college, actually, when Madison somehow maxed out a credit card our parents had given her for emergencies only. That card? It was used for everything but emergencies: spring break trips, designer clothes, expensive dinners. When the bills came due, I was the one with a work-study job and careful spending habits. I covered the minimum payments, just until Madison figured something out. Newsflash: Madison never figured anything out. The pattern was set early. Madison would create financial chaos with impulsive decisions. My parents would panic, and I would quietly solve the problem. Over the years, the problems just grew bigger, and my solutions more complex. The mortgage situation started when Dad lost his biggest client, you know? Henderson Accounting Services had handled their books for 12 years. Then the company was sold, and the new corporation brought in their own firm. Overnight, Dad lost about 40% of his income. "That's rough," Jenny acknowledged. "But couldn't he have found other clients?" I sipped my champagne, tasting the bitter irony along with the bubbles. "He could have, if he'd been willing to adapt. But Dad's been doing business the same way for 20 years. He doesn't understand digital marketing, never built an online presence, and refuses to learn new software. His remaining clients are all tiny, local businesses that barely cover his office rent." The real problem was, my father was always more interested in maintaining the appearance of success than actually building a sustainable business. He drove a leased Cadillac he absolutely couldn't afford, kept an office in an expensive building just to impress clients, and blew money on country club memberships and charity galas. All supposedly for networking opportunities, but they never, ever seemed to produce actual business. "What about your mom?" Jenny asked. "Mom's always been the enabler," I said, finishing my champagne and signaling for another round. "She worked full-time when Madison and I were younger, but once we hit high school, she decided she wanted to pursue her passion for literature. So, she got a part-time job at the library, barely covers groceries, and spends most of her time in book clubs and volunteer organizations. I didn't begrudge her the volunteer work, you know? It was meaningful to her. But she'd also developed seriously expensive tastes over the years. Organic everything, boutique stores instead of regular grocery chains, a weakness for home decor she justified as investing in our property values. So essentially," Jenny summarized, "your parents have been living beyond their means for years. And when reality caught up with them, they turned to you instead of making actual changes." "Exactly," I said. "And I enabled it. Because I thought it was temporary. I thought they'd use the breathing room I was providing to make smart decisions and get back on their feet. Instead, they used my financial support as permission to just keep living their unsustainable lifestyle. Even worse, they extended that lifestyle to Madison, who had learned to see money as something that magically appeared when needed, rather than something you had to earn through work and careful planning." "Tell me about Madison's date tonight," Jenny said. "What's so special about this Marcus guy?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Marcus Wellington III. His father's the mayor. His family owns half the commercial real estate in Westfield, and his trust fund is probably worth more than I'll make in my entire career. Madison met him at some charity auction last month." "Let me guess," Jenny said, "your parents see dollar signs." They see social elevation, I confirmed. Mom's been fantasizing about Madison marrying into the Wellington family since the second date. They imagine themselves at country club events, charity galas, political fundraisers, all the circles they've always wanted to move in but could never afford to access. The cruel irony was, my parents had no idea I already moved in those circles professionally. My work at Hartwell had brought me into contact with some of the wealthiest, most influential families in Connecticut. I'd restructured finances for people who made the Wellingtons look middle class. But because my interactions were professional, not social, because I wore conservative suits instead of designer gowns, my parents just couldn't see the level of success I had actually achieved. So tonight, I continued, they're rolling out the red carpet for Marcus's visit. Fresh flowers, the good china, probably a menu that costs more than most people spend on groceries in a month. All designed to impress a young man who probably won't even notice the details they're obsessing over. Jenny shook her head. And they canceled your birthday for this performance. They canceled my birthday, I agreed. But they have no idea what else they canceled along with it. I pulled out my phone and showed Jenny an email. It was from a potential client, a struggling tech startup that needed help restructuring their debt before their next funding round. The consultation fee alone would cover 3 months of my parents' mortgage payments. I was planning to take this meeting on Monday, I said. But now, I think I'll schedule it for tomorrow instead. After all, I suddenly have a free evening. Jenny grinned. I love it when you get that look in your eyes. What exactly are you planning? I raised my champagne glass. I'm planning to give my family exactly what they asked for, a perfect evening, focused entirely on Madison's future. But I'm also planning to show them what happens when they take their foundation for granted. Outside the hotel windows, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hartford's downtown streets. In a few hours, my family would be hosting their impressive dinner for Marcus Wellington III, using money I had provided and resources I had made possible. Tomorrow, they would finally begin to understand the difference between a foundation and a facade. The first real sign that something was fundamentally wrong with my family's priorities had come 6 months earlier. It was a cold March evening. I'd just returned home from a particularly grueling day at Hartwell and Associates, where I'd successfully negotiated a debt restructuring deal that literally saved a family-owned restaurant chain from bankruptcy. I was looking forward to a quiet dinner, maybe some reading. Instead, I found Madison in the living room, completely surrounded by shopping bags from Nordstrom, Saks, and several boutiques I knew were way beyond her part-time retail salary. She was trying on a pair of diamond earrings, glittering under our crystal chandelier like tiny, mocking stars. Those are beautiful, I'd said, dropping my briefcase by the door. Special occasion? Madison had looked up with that bright, guileless smile, the one that had charmed everyone since she was 3 years old. Marcus took me shopping. Well, not exactly together, but he mentioned that I have excellent taste and should trust my instincts more. So, I decided to upgrade my jewelry collection. Those earrings, I'd later discover, cost $3,200. Madison had charged them to a credit card that was supposed to be for emergencies only, a card whose monthly payments I'd been unknowingly covering for the past year. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into my parents' financial accounts where I was an authorized user, specifically so I could manage their mortgage and other major expenses. What I found was a masterclass in financial irresponsibility that went far beyond anything I had ever imagined. That emergency credit card wasn't the only one. Madison had somehow acquired 3 more, all linked to my parents' accounts, all carrying balances that totaled nearly $47,000. The purchases ranged from the ridiculous to the absurd: an $1,800 handbag for networking events, a $2,400 weekend getaway to Martha's Vineyard with friends, a $900 facial treatment at a luxury spa in Greenwich. But the credit cards? They were just the beginning of what I uncovered during my late-night investigation. My father's business account showed a pattern of declining revenue he'd been hiding from us for over 2 years. Instead of cutting expenses or finding new clients, he'd been taking cash advances and small business loans, desperately trying to maintain the illusion of stability. And my mother's spending? It had escalated dramatically too. Her small organic grocery purchases were now running $400, $500 a week. She joined an expensive wine club, signed up for premium streaming services, and was paying for a personal trainer 3 times a week. Each expense, on its own, seemed relatively modest. But together, they were a hemorrhage of money, a bleed that my parents seemed completely unable to acknowledge. But the most disturbing discovery? A file folder I found in my father's home office, labeled Investment Opportunities. Inside were brochures for timeshare properties, cryptocurrency schemes that were obviously fraudulent, and promotional materials for a multi-level marketing company selling overpriced nutritional supplements. My father had apparently invested $12,000 in various get-rich-quick schemes over the past 18 months. My jaw just dropped. I spent the next 3 weeks quietly documenting everything. As a financial analyst, I knew how crucial it was to have complete information before making any decisions. I created spreadsheets tracking every expense, every payment, every transfer. I researched the true value of their assets, the terms of their loans, and the realistic timeline for financial recovery, if they were willing to make serious changes. The picture that emerged was devastating. My parents weren't just struggling with temporary cash flow problems. They were on a clear trajectory toward complete financial ruin. Without my monthly contributions, they would lose the house within 6 months. And with my contributions? I was simply delaying the inevitable, while simultaneously making the eventual crash even more catastrophic. But what truly opened my eyes? Discovering Madison's career planning folder on the family computer. She had created these elaborate presentations about her modeling prospects, complete with projected earnings that bore zero relationship to reality. She'd meticulously calculated the cost of professional headshots, portfolio development, travel to casting calls in New York and LA. The total budget for her first year of serious modeling? $34,000. And then I saw it, she'd also been researching plastic surgery procedures. Nothing major, she noted in her careful handwriting, just some minor enhancements to make her more competitive in the industry. The consultation fees alone would cost more than most people's monthly salaries. The final straw came when I discovered Madison had been forging my signature on financial documents. She'd applied for a personal loan using my credit score and employment information, listing me as a co-signer, without my knowledge. Thankfully, the application had been rejected, but only because the lender called to verify my employment, and I was confused enough by their questions to investigate further. When I finally confronted Madison about the forged application, her response was breathtaking in its casualness. "I knew you wouldn't mind," she'd said, filing her nails, surrounded by fashion magazines on her bed. "You're always helping with money anyway. I just thought this would be easier than asking." She genuinely, truly didn't understand why I was upset. In her mind, my resources were just family resources, available for her whenever she decided she needed them. The concept that I might have my own financial goals, my own dreams that required money to achieve? It had never, ever occurred to her. That conversation happened in May. Since then, I'd been watching my family with completely new eyes. Documenting not just their financial decisions, but their attitudes, their assumptions. I even started keeping a journal, recording the casual comments that revealed how they really saw me and my role in their lives. "Samantha will handle it," was Mom's go-to response for every financial stress. "Samantha is so good with money," Dad would say, justifying purchases he couldn't afford. "Samantha doesn't mind," Madison would declare when she needed someone to cover her expenses. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking my agency. My identity. My right to make my own choices about my own life. I had become a resource to be managed, not a person to be respected. The breaking point had been building for months, you know? But honestly, I might have just kept enabling them indefinitely if not for a conversation I overheard 2 weeks before my birthday. Madison was on the phone with her friend Ashley, gushing about Marcus Wellington's interest in her. "The timing is perfect," Madison had said, her voice carrying so clearly through our thin walls. Mom and Dad are so desperate for me to marry well, they'll do anything to make sure Marcus is impressed. They're already talking about canceling Samantha's birthday party if it conflicts with the date. Can you imagine? Like anyone cares about Samantha's birthday anyway? Ashley's response was muffled, but Madison's laugh was crystal clear. Oh, Samantha won't care. She never cares about that stuff. She's too practical to get upset over a party. Besides, this could change our family's entire social status. Samantha should be grateful to contribute to something so important. I stood there, frozen in the hallway, listening to my sister dismiss my feelings, my worth, with such casual, chilling cruelty. But what hurt more than her words? The gut-wrenching realization that she was probably right about my parents' willingness to sacrifice my birthday for her dating prospects. That night, I called my college friend Rachel, who worked as a private investigator in Boston. I asked her to recommend someone local, someone who could help me document my family's financial situation with absolute legal precision. I wasn't planning to take them to court, not then, but I wanted records that would be admissible if things ever escalated. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chin, was thorough and discreet. Within 2 weeks, she provided me with a comprehensive report that confirmed everything I'd already discovered, and revealed several additional problems I had missed. My parents, it turned out, had taken out a second mortgage on the house without telling me, using the money to consolidate debt that had, of course, since been run up again. They'd also borrowed against my father's life insurance policy and were behind on payments to the IRS. I felt sick. Your family is in serious financial trouble, Patricia had told me during our final meeting. But more importantly, they're in serious denial. These aren't people who are going to change their behavior voluntarily. They're going to keep spending and borrowing until something forces them to stop. I thanked Patricia, paid her, and filed her report in my home safe, right alongside copies of all the financial documents I'd gathered. I wasn't sure when or how I would use the information, but I knew I needed a complete picture. The irony of it all gnawed at me. I had become an expert at saving other people's finances, yet I was allowing my own family to manipulate and exploit me. I could restructure million-dollar corporate debts, but I couldn't seem to establish healthy boundaries with the people who were supposed to love me most. Now, sitting in that Hartford hotel with Jenny, watching the sun set over the city where I'd built my professional reputation, I finally understood what had to happen. My family needed to learn the same lesson I taught my corporate clients. Consequences. That's the only thing that creates lasting change. So, what's the plan? Jenny asked, refilling our champagne glasses. I smiled, feeling a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Tomorrow morning, my parents are going to discover that their mortgage payment has been rejected by the bank. They're going to panic. They're going to call me. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm not going to rush in to fix their problem. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. And then? Then we'll see how important family priorities really are when the foundation starts to crumble. While my family prepared for Madison's grand dinner with Marcus Wellington III, I was orchestrating something far more sophisticated than they could have ever imagined. Jenny and I spent Saturday evening in my hotel suite, laptops open, spreadsheets displayed, planning what would essentially become a masterclass in strategic financial intervention. You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you? Jenny observed, watching me navigate through multiple banking interfaces with practiced efficiency. Since the moment I found Madison's forged loan application, I admitted, pulling up a detailed timeline I'd been developing for months. I realized then that this situation would never resolve itself naturally. They needed consequences, not just conversations. They needed a shock to the system. The beauty of my plan lay in its simplicity, and its legality. I wasn't stealing money or manipulating accounts that belonged to someone else. I was simply withdrawing my own financial support, in a strategic sequence designed to demonstrate exactly how dependent my family had become on my income. The mortgage payment? That was just the beginning. Over the past 18 months, I'd been covering far more than my parents even realized. Their car insurance. Their health insurance premiums. The property taxes on the house. Madison's car payment. Even the monthly fees for services they considered essential: Netflix, Spotify, the lawn care service, the house cleaning lady who came twice a month. Look at this, I said, showing Jenny a spreadsheet that broke down every single expense I'd been covering. They think I just help with the mortgage. But I've been subsidizing their entire lifestyle. Watch what happens when I stop. I'd already contacted my insurance agent and removed my parents' vehicles from my policy. Come Monday morning, they'd receive notice that their coverage had lapsed. They'd need to secure new insurance immediately or risk having their licenses suspended. The cost? Nearly double what they'd been paying through my group rate. Next, I logged into the property tax system for Westfield. My parents believed their property taxes were automatically deducted from their mortgage payment, but that hadn't been true for 6 months, not since they refinanced. I'd been paying the taxes separately to prevent penalties. The next payment was due in 10 days, and without it, the town would begin lien proceedings against the house. "This is brilliant," Jenny said, reading over my shoulder. "You're not hurting them, you're just removing your subsidies." "Exactly," I confirmed. "They're going to learn very quickly what their actual cost of living is without my financial support. And they're going to have to make some very difficult decisions about priorities." But the mortgage payment timing? That was the most crucial element of my strategy. I had deliberately waited until the day after it was due to cancel the automatic transfer. This meant that when the bank processed the payment and found insufficient funds in my parents' account, they would immediately send a notice of default. My parents would have exactly 10 days to bring their account current before the bank could begin foreclosure proceedings. The psychological impact, I knew, would be devastating. My parents had never missed a mortgage payment in their lives. They prided themselves on their responsible homeownership, their good credit, their standing in the community. Receiving that first notice of default would shatter their sense of security in a way that no conversation, no argument, ever could. "What about Madison's car?" Jenny asked, scrolling through my detailed expense breakdown. I smiled. Madison's BMW convertible was financed through a lease that I had co-signed and been paying for the past 2 years. The lease agreement had specific terms about insurance, maintenance, and usage. Madison had violated several of those terms: 2 speeding tickets that increased insurance premiums, exceeding the annual mileage limit, and minor damage to the passenger side door that she'd never reported or repaired. "I'm not going to cancel her car payment immediately," I explained. "That would be too obvious. Instead, I'm going to let the leasing company discover the violations. They'll demand immediate payment of the penalties and damages, plus increased insurance coverage. The total? About $8,000, due within 30 days. And if they can't pay? The car gets repossessed. Madison will have to find alternative transportation to her dates with Marcus." I had also been paying for Madison's cell phone, her gym membership, her subscription boxes, and her Amazon Prime account. Each of these would be cancelled systematically over the next 2 weeks, creating a cascade of small inconveniences that would gradually, painfully, build into a clear picture of exactly how much I had been subsidizing her lifestyle. The most sophisticated part of my plan involved my father's business. Henderson Accounting Services was hemorrhaging money, but Dad had been hiding this from potential clients by maintaining an expensive office lease and professional appearances he couldn't actually afford. I had been subsidizing these costs indirectly by covering his personal expenses, which allowed him to pour his meager business income into maintaining an illusion of success. Through my professional network, I'd learned that several of his remaining clients were considering switching to larger accounting firms that could provide more comprehensive services. I'd also discovered that 2 of his clients were behind on their payments to him, creating cash flow problems he'd been covering with credit card advances. I've been protecting him from the natural consequences of his business decisions, I told Jenny. He's been able to make poor choices because he knew I would always cover the household expenses. Once I stop doing that, he'll have to choose between maintaining his expensive office image and keeping a roof over his family's head. I had also already arranged for my own exit strategy. Through my side consulting practice, I built strong relationships with several clients who had been asking me to take on larger projects. One client, a tech startup in Hartford, had just offered me a contract position that would pay almost as much as my current salary at Hartwell and Associates, with the flexibility to work remotely and build my own practice even further on the side. "You're going independent?" Jenny asked, when I explained the job offer. "I've been planning this transition for 6 months. I have enough savings to cover my expenses for a full year, and enough potential clients to build a truly sustainable practice. I was just waiting for the right moment to make the move." That moment, I realized, had arrived with my cancelled birthday party. The symbolic, painful rejection of my value to the family had finally given me the permission I needed to prioritize my own future over their immediate needs. My needs. For once. I had also been strategic about apartment hunting. The downtown Hartford loft I'd viewed that afternoon was absolutely perfect. Close to my new clients' offices, spacious enough for a home office, and available for immediate occupancy. The lease terms were flexible, the building modern and secure. And the monthly rent? It was actually less than what I had been contributing to my parents' household expenses. "When do you move?" Jenny asked. "I can sign the lease tomorrow if I want it. The landlord already approved my application based on my credit score and employment verification. I could be completely moved out by next weekend." The timing was crucial. I wanted to be physically removed from that house before my family fully understood what was happening. I didn't want to be present for the initial panic, the pleading, the guilt trips, the attempts to manipulate me into resuming my financial support. I needed distance to maintain my resolve. But I also wanted them to have time to process the situation and, just maybe, make better choices. If they responded to the crisis by cutting expenses, finding additional income, and treating me with the respect I deserved, I would consider resuming some limited financial assistance. But if they responded with manipulation, blame, and demands that I sacrifice my future for their comfort, then I would know that permanent separation was the only healthy option. "What about Madison's dinner tonight?" Jenny asked, bringing me back to the immediate situation. I checked my watch. Almost 7 p.m. Marcus Wellington III would be arriving at my parents' house soon, expecting a perfectly orchestrated evening designed to impress him and his family. My parents had spent the entire day preparing, using money I had provided and resources I had made possible. "Tonight they get exactly what they wanted," I said, closing my laptop with a quiet, grim satisfaction. A perfect evening focused entirely on Madison's future prospects. Tomorrow? They start learning about consequences. I had even planned a small, ironic gift for the occasion. Earlier that afternoon, I'd arranged for a bottle of expensive champagne to be delivered to the house with a note: "Congratulations on prioritizing what matters most. Love, Samantha." My parents, I knew, would interpret it as gracious acceptance of their decision to cancel my birthday. They had no idea it was actually a farewell gesture. A final toast. Jenny raised her own champagne glass in a toast. To strategic planning and natural consequences. To finally putting myself first. I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. Outside our hotel window, the lights of Hartford twinkled like a million stars, representing a future that was, finally, completely mine to choose. Sunday morning, 6:04 a.m. My phone vibrated, jarring me awake. I was still in the Hartford hotel suite, actually having enjoyed a peaceful night's sleep for the first time in months. Then my mother's panicked voice shattered the quiet. "Samantha, thank God you answered. We have an emergency. The bank called saying our mortgage payment was rejected. There must be some kind of mistake with the automatic transfer. Can you check your account and fix this immediately?" I sat up slowly, deliberately taking my time before responding. Through the hotel window, the early morning sun cast long, golden shadows across the city. It felt symbolic somehow. The dawn of a new chapter. "Good morning, Mom," I said, my voice remarkably calm. "How was Madison's dinner last night?" "The dinner was wonderful, but Samantha, this is serious. The bank is saying we have 10 days to bring the account current, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." This has to be an error. You've never missed a payment. You're right, I replied, getting out of bed and walking to the window. I have never missed a payment. But I also didn't make this month's payment. The silence that followed was so complete, I could practically hear my mother's shocked breathing through the phone. In the background, I could hear my father's voice, asking urgent questions Mom couldn't yet answer. What do you mean you didn't make the payment? She finally whispered, her voice barely audible. I mean exactly that. I canceled the automatic transfer yesterday morning. The payment that was supposed to be processed on Saturday didn't happen because I chose not to make it. But why? Is this about your birthday, Samantha? I know you were disappointed, but this is our house. You can't just stop paying the mortgage because you're upset about a party. The fact that she still didn't understand the fundamental issue was both infuriating and incredibly clarifying. This wasn't about a cancelled birthday party. This was about years of being taken for granted, exploited, and treated as a financial resource rather than a family member deserving of basic respect. Put Dad on the phone, I said, and put me on speaker. We need to have a family meeting. I heard rustling, footsteps, and then my father's voice, strained with panic. Samantha, what's going on? Your mother says you didn't make the mortgage payment. That can't be right. It's completely right, Dad. And I also canceled your car insurance, which expires tomorrow. The property taxes are due in 9 days, and I won't be paying those either. Madison's car lease has some violations that need to be addressed immediately, and her cell phone service will be disconnected on Tuesday. The explosion of voices was immediate. Overlapping. My mother was shrieking about how I could do this to them. My father was demanding explanations. And I could hear Madison in the background, wailing about her phone and her car. The chaos was exactly what I had expected. But experiencing it? It felt strangely liberating, not upsetting at all. Let me explain something to all of you, I said, raising my voice to cut through their panic. For the past 18 months, I have been covering approximately $4,800 per month in your expenses. That includes the mortgage, insurance, taxes, and various other costs that you've either forgotten about or never even realized I was handling. $4,800? My father repeated, his voice faint, disbelieving. Every month. I have detailed records of every payment, every transfer, every bill I've covered. I also have documentation of the additional $47,000 in credit card debt that Madison has accumulated, the failed business investments you've made, Dad, and the loans you've taken against the house without telling me. I heard Madison gasp. How do you know about my credit cards? Because I'm listed as an authorized user on the accounts where the bills get paid, I retorted, my voice steady. Because I'm a financial analyst who notices when $3,200 diamond earrings suddenly appear on statements. Because I've been subsidizing your entire lifestyle, while you all pretended I was just helping out occasionally. My mother's voice was shaking now. Samantha, even if you're upset with us, you can't just stop paying the mortgage. We'll lose the house. You might lose the house, I corrected. That depends entirely on the choices you make over the next 10 days. You could get second jobs. Sell some of Madison's expensive purchases. Take out a loan. Or ask your wealthy new friends for help. You have options. You just haven't needed to explore them because I've been enabling your poor financial decisions. This is crazy. Madison's voice shrieked, clear as day through the phone. Now you're being vindictive and cruel. All because we postponed your stupid birthday party. That casual dismissal of my feelings, even in the middle of a full-blown financial crisis, was exactly the confirmation I needed that I was making the right decision. Madison, I said, my voice deadly calm. Your car is going to be repossessed within 30 days, unless someone pays $8,000 in penalties for the damage you've caused and the terms you violated. Your credit cards are maxed out on accounts that I've been paying minimum balances for. Your phone, your gym membership, your subscription boxes? All cancelled. Your modeling career fund that you've been building with other people's money? That ends today. You can't do this to me. Marcus is taking me to dinner at the country club next weekend. I need my car. I need my phone. Then you need to figure out how to pay for them yourself, I replied flatly. Or ask Marcus for help. Or get a full-time job, like most 23-year-olds. My father tried a different approach, his voice trying for calm. Samantha, I understand you're angry, but let's be reasonable here. We can discuss changes to our arrangements, maybe set up a formal loan structure with interest payments. But you can't just pull the rug out from under us without warning. Without warning? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Dad, I've been warning you for 2 years. Every time I suggested you find new clients instead of depending on my support. Every time I recommended Madison get a real job instead of pursuing fantasy careers. Every time I pointed out that your expenses were unsustainable, you ignored every warning. Because it was easier to just take my money than to make difficult changes. I could hear them, conferring among themselves now, scrambling to figure out how to handle this crisis. The irony was perfect. They were finally having the urgent financial planning conversation they should have been having for years. What do you want from us? My mother finally asked, her voice small. I want you to learn to solve your own problems. I want Madison to understand that actions have consequences. I want Dad to either make his business profitable or find employment that actually covers his expenses. I want all of you to treat me like a family member instead of an ATM. And if we do that, you'll start helping again? My father asked, a desperate hope in his voice. Maybe. Or maybe I'll decide that it's time for me to focus on my own future instead of constantly rescuing you from yours. I've accepted a new job, Dad. I'm moving to Hartford. And I'm starting my own consulting practice. For the first time in my adult life, I'm going to prioritize my own goals. The silence that followed was heavy. Just pure shock. They had never considered the possibility that I might have my own ambitions, my own life to build. In their minds, I existed primarily to support their dreams and clean up their mistakes. You're moving out? My mother whispered. I'm moving on, I corrected. There's a difference. You can reach me at this number if you need to discuss truly important matters. But the era of me solving every problem and covering every expense is over. Samantha, please! Madison cried, her voice desperate now, not angry. I'm supposed to see Marcus again tomorrow night. I can't show up in Dad's old Honda. What will I tell him? You could tell him the truth, I suggested. That your family has been living beyond your means, and you're learning to be more responsible. Or you could ask him to pick you up. Or you could take an Uber. You have choices, Madison. You just haven't had to make them before. My father cleared his throat. What about the mortgage payment? Even if we accept everything else you're saying, we need time to figure this out. Can you just cover this month while we make arrangements? No, I said simply. You have 10 days to bring the account current. You have the same options any other family in a financial crisis would have. You can ask relatives for help, take out a personal loan, sell possessions, or find additional income. The only thing you can't do is expect me to continue enabling your irresponsible choices. I could hear crying now. My mother's quiet tears, Madison's frustrated sobs. But I also heard something else. My father's voice, quiet and thoughtful, as he began discussing actual solutions with my mother. For the first time in years, they were talking about cutting expenses instead of finding ways to increase their income through my contributions. I love all of you, I said, meaning it despite everything. But I won't sacrifice my future for your comfort anymore. You have 10 days to figure out the mortgage. Everything else gets resolved as you're able to manage it. I have confidence that you'll find a way. You just haven't needed to try before. It was the hardest thing I'd ever said. I ended the call and immediately turned off my phone. Outside the hotel window, Hartford was fully awake now, bustling with Sunday morning activity. People were jogging along the riverfront, families heading to brunch, couples walking dogs through the historic district. All of them living their own lives, pursuing their own goals, making their own choices about how to spend their time and money. For the first time in years, I was about to join them. Jenny emerged from the bedroom, already dressed, holding 2 cups of coffee from the hotel's premium service. "How did it go?" she asked softly. "Exactly as expected," I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Panic, blame, desperation, and a complete failure to understand why I'm done enabling them." "Any regrets?" she pressed. I considered the question seriously, looking out at the city that was about to become my new home. "None at all," I finally said. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel free." By Wednesday morning, the Henderson family's carefully constructed world had begun to collapse in spectacular fashion. I was in my new Hartford apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, setting up my home office. Jenny had stayed to help me move, and we were unpacking kitchen supplies when my phone started buzzing. I turned it back on for business calls, but the flood of texts from my family painted a vivid picture of their rapidly deteriorating situation. From my mother: "Insurance company called. Cars aren't covered. Can't drive Madison to work. I need help immediately." From my father: "The bank wants $3,047 to bring the mortgage current plus late fees. Don't have it. What do we do?" From Madison: "My phone got shut off in the middle of a call with Marcus. This is humiliating. Fix this now." But the most revealing message? It came from my father's business partner, Tony Ritchie, who had called me directly. Tony and my father had been running Henderson and Ritchie Accounting together for 3 years, though I'd never been entirely clear on what Tony actually contributed to the partnership. "Samantha," Tony said when I returned his call, his voice grave, "I need to talk to you about your father's financial situation. He's been borrowing money from the business account to cover personal expenses, and now we can't make payroll for our employees." This was news to me. "How much has he borrowed?" I asked, my stomach churning. $18,000 over the past 6 months. He kept saying it was temporary, that his daughter was helping with the family finances and he'd pay it back soon. But now he's saying you've cut him off. And frankly, the business can't survive this kind of drain." A cold chill of realization ran through me. My father hadn't just been mismanaging his personal finances. He had been stealing from his own business to maintain his lifestyle, using my mortgage payments as justification for his theft. "Tony, I had no idea about any of this. My father never told me he was taking money from the business." "Well, he needs to return it immediately, or I'm going to have to dissolve the partnership and report the missing funds," Tony said, his voice firm. "I've got 3 employees who depend on their paychecks, and I won't let them suffer because Robert can't manage his personal expenses." After hanging up with Tony, I just sat there in my new living room, staring out at the Hartford skyline, trying to process the full scope of my father's deception. It wasn't just that he'd been irresponsible with money. He had been actively dishonest with his business partner, his employees, and his family. The weight of it was suffocating. My phone rang again. This time? It was Marcus Wellington III himself. "Ms. Henderson?" His voice was polite, but clearly confused. "This is Marcus Wellington. I believe I've been dating your sister, Madison." "Yes, I know who you are," I replied, curious about why he would be calling me directly. "I'm calling because Madison asked me to contact you about some financial difficulties your family is experiencing. She seems to think you might be able to help resolve some issues with her car and phone service." I almost laughed at the sheer audacity. Madison had actually asked her new boyfriend to call me and request financial assistance on her behalf. "Marcus, I appreciate you calling, but Madison's financial problems are her responsibility to solve. I'm no longer involved in managing my family's expenses." There was a pause. "I see." Madison gave me the impression that this was some kind of temporary misunderstanding between siblings. "She said you were just upset about a birthday party." "Madison has a tendency to minimize complex situations," I said. "The reality is that my family has been living beyond their means for years, and I've decided to stop enabling that behavior." Marcus's tone shifted, becoming more thoughtful. "That puts things in a different perspective. Madison mentioned that her family was well established financially. I gather that's not entirely accurate." I chose my words carefully. I think you should ask Madison to be more honest with you about her actual circumstances. She's a lovely person, but she's never had to face real financial responsibility. After we hung up, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and, surprisingly, a little sympathy. Marcus Wellington III wasn't looking for a charity case. He was looking for an equal partner from a stable, successful family. Madison's deceptions were about to catch up with her in ways she couldn't have anticipated. And it was going to hit hard. The next call came from my Aunt Carol, who had driven up from Philadelphia for my cancelled birthday party and was now staying with my parents to help manage the crisis. "Samantha," Carol said, her voice tight with stress, "I need you to understand what's happening here. Your parents are in complete panic. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since Sunday. Your father is talking about declaring bankruptcy. And Madison? She's locked herself in her room and won't come out. What about solutions?" I asked, my voice firm. "Are they taking any practical steps to address their problems? Your father went to 3 different banks trying to get a personal loan, but his credit is apparently much worse than anyone realized. Your mother called everyone she knows asking for money, which was humiliating for her. And Madison? She applied for full-time jobs at 6 different places yesterday. This was progress. Real progress, actually. For the first time in years, my family was facing reality and taking concrete action to solve their problems, instead of just expecting me to handle everything. Carol, they're doing exactly what they should be doing. These are the steps they should have taken years ago, instead of relying on my income. But Samantha, they could lose the house. Your childhood home. That's possible, I agreed. It's also possible they'll find a way to save it. But either way, it won't be because I sacrificed my future to enable their poor decisions. Carol was quiet for a moment. I have to ask, are you really prepared to let them lose everything? It was a fair question, and one I had been wrestling with since Sunday. I'm prepared to let them face the natural consequences of their choices, I said, my voice steady. If they lose the house, they can rent something smaller and more affordable. If Madison loses her car, she can take public transportation or save up for something she can actually afford. If Dad loses his business, he can find employment that provides steady income. And if they hate me for this, then I'll know that their love was conditional on my willingness to bankrupt myself for their comfort. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor. Madison. She appeared at my apartment building, looking disheveled and desperate. The doorman called up to ask if I wanted to see her, and after a moment's hesitation I agreed. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed, pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt instead of her typical designer outfits. Most tellingly, she'd obviously been crying. "Can I come up?" she asked when I met her in the lobby. Of course. We rode the elevator to my floor in silence. When we reached my apartment, Madison looked around with obvious surprise at the modern, sophisticated space I had chosen for myself. "This is really nice," she said quietly. "Thank you. I've been saving for my own place for a long time." We sat in my living room. For several long minutes neither of us spoke. Finally, Madison broke the silence. "Marcus broke up with me today." I felt a pang of sympathy, despite everything. "I'm sorry. What happened?" He said he didn't appreciate being misled about our family's financial situation. Apparently, when his parents found out that our house might be foreclosed on, they told him he should date someone from a more stable background. Madison's voice was flat, defeated, in a way I had never heard before. He was right to break up with me. I did mislead him. I've been pretending to be someone I'm not for so long that I forgot who I actually am. This was not the conversation I had expected. "Madison, you're 23 years old. You have time to figure out who you want to be. But I don't know how to be responsible. I don't know how to live within my means. I've never had to try." She looked at me with something approaching respect for the first time in years. "How did you learn all this stuff? How do you manage money and plan for the future and make it look so easy?" "It's not easy," I told her. Honestly, it requires discipline and sacrifice and making choices about what's truly important. But it's also incredibly freeing to know that you can take care of yourself. Madison nodded slowly. I applied for a full-time job at a marketing company today. The salary is only $32,000, but they said if I work hard, I could advance pretty quickly. That's a good start, I said. I also listed all my designer clothes and jewelry on consignment websites. The woman at the shop said I could probably get about $15,000 for everything, maybe more. I felt a surge of pride for my sister. These were exactly the kinds of difficult, but necessary, decisions she needed to make. This was real. What about Mom and Dad? I asked. Madison's expression darkened. Dad told Tony Ritchie that he'll pay back the money he borrowed, but he has no idea how. Mom is talking about selling her jewelry and maybe getting a full-time job for the first time in 10 years. They're both angry at you, but they're also starting to realize how much you were doing for us. Are you angry at me? I asked, looking directly at her. Madison considered the question seriously. I was. For the first few days I hated you. I thought you were being cruel and vindictive. But then I started thinking about how I would feel if someone treated me the way we've been treating you. She looked directly at me, a genuine, heartfelt gaze. We've been terrible to you. We took your money, your support, your sacrifice, and we never even said thank you. We just expected it, like it was something we deserved, instead of something you chose to give us. It was the most honest, mature thing I had ever heard my sister say. I don't hate you, Madison, I said softly. I never did. I just couldn't continue enabling behavior that was hurting all of us. I know. She stood up to leave. I don't know if Mom and Dad will ever really understand what they did wrong, but I'm going to try to do better. Starting with paying my own bills and cleaning up my own messes. After she left, I sat in my apartment, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years: hope. Hope for my family's future. Not the future I had been financing and managing for them, but the future they might build for themselves, if they were willing to do the work. Outside my windows, the lights of Hartford stretched out like a promise of possibility. For the first time since this whole situation began, I thought there might be a chance for genuine healing. 3 months later, on a crisp December morning, I was preparing for the grand opening of Caldwell Financial Solutions when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother's number, but I almost didn't recognize her voice when I answered. Samantha, it's Mom. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. That tentative, respectful tone was completely different from the demanding panic I'd heard in her voice during our last conversation in September. Something fundamental had shifted in our dynamic. Not at all, I replied, setting down the promotional materials I'd been reviewing for my new office space. How are things going? Better than I expected, actually. I wanted to call and, well, there are some things I need to tell you. Things I should have said months ago. I settled into my desk chair, looking out at the Hartford Business District, where I had built my new life. In the 3 months since I'd withdrawn my financial support, I'd heard updates about my family through Aunt Carol and Madison, but this was the first direct communication from my mother. My heart pounded a little. We saved the house, she said first, a tremor of emotion in her voice. It took everything we had, and we had to make some major changes. But we brought the mortgage current with 2 days to spare. How did you manage that? I asked, genuinely curious. Your father sold his Cadillac and bought a used Toyota. I sold all my jewelry except my wedding ring and my mother's pearl necklace. Madison contributed $12,000 from selling her clothes and accessories. And she paused, her voice catching slightly. I took a full-time position at the regional library system. I'm now the head of their adult literacy program. My eyes widened. Wow. I felt a surge of genuine pride. Mom, that's wonderful. You always loved that work. I do love it, she said, a smile in her voice. And the salary is much better than I expected. Between my income and the money your father is finally making from his business, we can actually cover our expenses without. She trailed off. Without my help, I finished gently. Yes. And Samantha, I need you to know how ashamed I am that it took losing you to make us realize what we had been doing. We weren't just taking your money. We were taking your life, your dreams, your future. We treated you like a resource instead of our daughter. It was the apology I had been waiting to hear for years. But now that it had finally come, I found myself more focused on the incredible changes she was describing than on my own vindication. What about Dad's business? I asked. That's actually going really well. Losing the partnership with Tony was devastating at first, but it forced your father to completely restructure how he operates. He moved to a smaller office, started using modern accounting software, and began offering virtual services to clients outside of Westfield. His revenue has actually increased by 30%. This was genuinely surprising. He adapted to digital services? My mother laughed, and I could hear real joy in it. Madison taught him. She's been working as his part-time marketing coordinator while she finishes her business degree. Did you know she enrolled in night classes at the community college? I hadn't known that. What's she studying? Business administration, with a focus on digital marketing. She says she wants to understand how money actually works instead of just spending it. She's completely changed, Samantha. She's working 40 hours a week at that marketing company, going to school 3 nights a week, and she's been saving money for the first time in her life. The transformation sounded almost too dramatic to believe, but my mother's voice carried absolute conviction. She's been dating someone new. My mother continued. A teacher she met in one of her business classes. He drives a 10-year-old Honda and lives in a small apartment. And Madison says she's never been happier? She told me that Marcus Wellington was attracted to what he thought our family represented, but David likes who she actually is. My heart swelled. We talked for another 20 minutes. With each update, I felt layers of old resentment beginning to dissolve. My family hadn't just survived the financial crisis I had created. They had used it as an opportunity to build something more authentic and sustainable. Something real. There's one more thing, my mother said as our conversation began to wind down. We'd like to invite you to Christmas dinner. Not because we need anything from you, but because we miss you. Because you're our daughter, and we love you. And because we want to show you the people we've become. I'd like that, Mom, I said, meaning it completely. A tear pricked my eye. After we hung up, I sat in my office, just thinking. Thinking about the journey that had brought us all to this point. That dramatic confrontation, sparked by a cancelled birthday party, had forced my entire family to confront fundamental truths about responsibility, respect, and authentic relationships. And my own transformation? It had been just as profound. Caldwell Financial Solutions had grown from a side practice to a thriving consultancy, with 12 regular clients and a waiting list for new appointments. I specialized in helping people navigate financial transitions, divorces, career changes, family crises, entrepreneurial ventures. My reputation for combining technical expertise with emotional intelligence had spread throughout Connecticut's business community. More importantly, I had learned to set boundaries and prioritize my own needs without guilt. My apartment in Hartford wasn't just a place, it had become a home where I felt genuinely comfortable and secure. I joined a hiking club, taken up pottery classes, and even started dating a fellow financial consultant I'd met at a professional conference. For the first time in my adult life, I was living for myself, while still maintaining the capacity to help others when I chose to do so. The irony wasn't lost on me. My family's crisis had ultimately benefited everyone involved. My parents had discovered strengths and capabilities they never knew they possessed. Madison had learned to value authentic relationships over social performance. My father had modernized his business and found new success. My mother had returned to meaningful work that utilized her education and passions. And I had finally claimed the independence and respect I had been unconsciously seeking for years. It was a brutal journey, but we all came out better. On Christmas morning, I drove to Westfield for the first time since moving out. The house looked smaller somehow, but also warmer, more welcoming. There were no expensive decorations or elaborate displays, just simple, thoughtful touches that reflected my family's new appreciation for what they could actually afford. Madison answered the door, and I almost didn't recognize her. She looked healthy and confident in a way that had nothing to do with designer clothes or perfect makeup. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair in a simple ponytail, and she was genuinely smiling. "Samantha!" she exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "I can't wait for you to meet David. He's in the kitchen helping Dad with the turkey. Fair warning, they're both terrible cooks, but they're having so much fun trying." The scene in the kitchen was exactly as Madison had described. My father and a pleasant-looking young man in his late 20s were attempting to coordinate a holiday meal with that kind of enthusiastic incompetence that comes from genuine effort, not the expectation that someone else will handle the difficult parts. "Samantha!" my father called out, wiping his hands on an apron that read "World's Okayest Cook," clearly a gift that reflected his new, more realistic self-assessment. "Come settle an argument. David says we should baste the turkey every 30 minutes. But the recipe says every hour." "Every 30 minutes," I said, accepting a hug from my father that felt profoundly different from any embrace we had shared in years. There was respect in it, gratitude without desperation, and genuine affection that wasn't complicated by financial obligation. It was warm. Dinner was imperfect, but it was delicious. The turkey was slightly dry, the mashed potatoes a little lumpy, and the green bean casserole was obviously from a recipe my mother had found online that morning. But the conversation? It was rich with stories about my family's new ventures, challenges they had overcome, and plans for a future they were building together. David turned out to be thoughtful and funny, with that quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and being comfortable with that identity. He and Madison clearly adored each other, but their relationship was based on mutual respect and shared values, not social ambition or financial convenience. It was a beautiful thing to see. "Madison tells me you're the one who finally taught her family about accountability," David said during dessert, a twinkle in his eye. "That must have been a difficult decision." "It was necessary," I replied. "But I never imagined it would lead to such positive changes for everyone." "Sometimes people need a crisis to discover what they're really capable of," my mother said quietly, looking at me with gentle understanding. We certainly did. As the evening wound down, my father pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Samantha, I need to say something that's long overdue. What I did to you, taking your money, your support, your sacrifice for granted, it was wrong. Not just financially irresponsible, but morally wrong. You deserve better from us. And I'm sorry it took losing you to make me understand that." "Thank you for saying that, Dad," I murmured, my throat tight. "I also want you to know that we're not going to ask you for money ever again. Not because we're proud or stubborn, but because we've learned that depending on you was preventing us from becoming the people we needed to be." He handed me an envelope. "This is our first payment toward repaying what we owe you. It's not much, only $500, but we're committed to paying back every dollar you spent supporting us, with interest." I looked at the check, feeling emotions I couldn't quite identify. A mix of surprise, relief, and profound gratitude. "Dad, you don't have to." "Yes, we do," he interrupted firmly. "We absolutely do. Not because you need the money, but because we need to make this right. Because debts should be repaid. And because our relationship with you should be based on mutual respect, not financial obligation." When I left that evening, I carried with me something I hadn't expected to find. Genuine hope for my family's future, and real affection for the resilient, honest people they had become. It was worth every single moment of pain. 6 months later, I received another envelope from my parents. This one contained not just their monthly payment toward the debt they were repaying, but also a birthday invitation. Not for Madison this time, but for me. "We'd like to throw you a proper birthday celebration," my mother had written. "Nothing elaborate or expensive. Just family and friends celebrating someone we love and respect, if you're willing to trust us with planning it." I smiled, thinking about how far we had all traveled from that raw September morning when my birthday had been cancelled. for Madison's date. The woman who had orchestrated such a dramatic intervention felt like a different person now. Someone who had been trapped by her own enabling patterns, and had needed to break free just as much as her family had needed to learn independence. Now, looking back, I can see it clearly. Canceling that mortgage payment? It hadn't been revenge at all. It had been the greatest gift I could have ever given my family, the opportunity to discover their own strength, their capability, and their authentic happiness. And in the process, I had given myself the greatest gift of all. A life that was, finally, completely my own. A life I truly loved. It just took a little bit of tough love to get there. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with family or friends to save yourself? I'd love to hear your stories and what you think about mine down in the comments below. Let's talk about it.